Hello, my name is Rhianna, and recently I thought it would be a nice idea to read some of my favourite Booktubers' favourite books of 2023. So as often happens when the end of the year comes around, I ended up watching quite a few favourite books of the year videos. And while I did, I picked out a few books that I wanted to read in January, and so in this video I thought I would talk a bit about them. And so the Booktubers that I chose books from are Jack Edwards, and I chose Sula by Toni Morrison, and Dakota Warren, and I chose Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson, and Uncali, and I chose Penance by Eliza Clark. So yes, here are some of my thoughts on those books. So the first Booktuber is Jack Edwards, and I chose Sula by Toni Morrison. And I loved this book. I thought it was great. This book is about a place in America called the Bottom during, after the First World War, so from 1919 to about the 1960s. And it looks at a few different characters that exist within the Bottom, but it primarily looks at Nell and Sula and their friendship from when they are children to when they are adults. And the novel explores a lot of themes. It is bursting full of ideas. And one of the themes that the novel explores is identity. And are we who we are because of what we decide, or are we who we are because of our families and because of our upbringing and because of our location, or because of where we are? And there is a quote I really like in the novel. I'll find it. And it's, "I'm me," she whispered, "me." Nell didn't know quite what she meant, but on the other hand, she knew exactly what she meant. I'm me, I'm not their daughter, I'm not Nell, I'm me. And that quote is from when Nell is like a 10-year-old and she's coming to kind of understand herself for the first time, maybe becoming sentient for the first time. I think we can all relate to that moment when we are children and we suddenly realise that we are alive and we are who we are. The novel also explores good versus evil and how they can actually be quite similar to each other. And it also explores social conventions and whether social conventions restrict us or aid us. And what I really loved about this novel is how Toni Morrison weaved together the characters from Bottom, how she started with one character and then started introducing more characters, and the way that she wrote and the way that she curated this location and made it feel so real and alive and moving felt a little magical, really, as I was reading. It felt like the writing was like, it had that spark to it, which is really nice when you're reading. The next book I read was one of Dakota Warren's favourite books of 2023, and that is Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson. I finished this book about a week ago now, and when I finished, I went on the internet to look at some reviews of the book to see what other people thought about it, and I read a review that said how we don't know the gender of the protagonist, and that is true. The gender of the protagonist is never said. However, I just had it such in my head that the narrator was a female. I don't know, I could have sworn there was somewhere in the novel that said she was female, but looking back, I don't believe there was. So it was kind of interesting to me how I had just presumed that the narrator was female. I had just interpreted that. Whereas in actuality, we don't know the gender of the protagonist. So I think it's quite interesting how as readers, we interpret things to be a certain way sometimes. And we sort of create the story as well as the writer, because I had such a clear image of who this protagonist was in my head, but someone else could read the book and maybe not even view the protagonist as a woman, they could view the protagonist as a man. And I think it's quite interesting how the novel sort of changes depending on whether you view the protagonist as a woman or view the protagonist as a man. I think that's really interesting. And yes, I really loved this book. It's all about love, and this nameless narrator loves really deeply. There is a lot in this book about what it is to love someone, but also what it is to lose someone. And especially near the end of the novel, it talks a bit about death. And I really love this quote. "I've thought a lot about death recently, the finality of it, the argument ending in midair. One of us hadn't finished, why did the other one go? And why without any warning? Even death, after long illness, is without warning. The moment you had prepared for so carefully took you by storm. The troops broke through the window and snatched the body, and the body is gone. The day before the Wednesday last, this time a year ago, you were here and now you're not. Why not? Death reduces us to the baffled logic of a small child. If yesterday, why not today? And I think this book is just such an enjoyable read. It's fast-paced and elastic. The writer isn't afraid to jump around. She has such a confidence when she's writing. And I think if you're a bit cynical about love, you might not enjoy this, because the novel takes love really seriously, and perhaps some could interpret it as a bit melodramatic, but I loved the drama of it, and I think, love is dramatic, so it was deserving how dramatic this novel viewed love. And I think this was one of my new favourites. I really enjoyed this one. The final book that I read was one of Ankali's favourite books of the year, and it is Penance by Eliza Clark. Now, how to describe this novel? This novel is a fictional, non-fiction, true crime book about a girl called Joan who was burned alive by 3 school friends during the night of the Brexit referendum, which is significant because in the book, that is the reason why the crime story wasn't really publicised so much, because it was, of course, overshadowed by this bigger news story that was occurring. And as a consequence, a few years down the line, after this tragic event occurring, it suddenly hits mainstream and becomes part of the public view, the public sphere, and more people know about it. And the novel is split into different parts. We hear from the 3 perpetrators of this attack, and also from another girl who was wrongly arrested. But we never hear from Joan, and I think which is the girl who was murdered, and I think while you're reading the story, you have that in the back of your mind. You're aware that you're never hearing from the victim. And I think that is the problem with true crime. It's that the victim is never there to tell their side of the story, or most of the times isn't there to tell their side of the story, because they are the victim. And the novel explores whether true crime is really a morally correct thing to do, because you are making kind of entertainment out of horrific things that have happened to somebody. The novel also looks at how horrible teenagers can be to one another, the effects of bullying, and it explores the danger of the internet, how especially young people can be really affected by the things that they read online. And yeah, this novel is quite different to anything I've read before, and different to things I typically read. I typically don't read a lot of true crime, but I thought it was very well done, very well crafted. It's a bit like a puzzle, the novel. And so yes, those were some books that I've read recently that were recommended by other booktubers. Let me know if you've ever read these books before. I would love to hear your thoughts, and I will see you in another video soon. Bye bye.